Nancy, who I know. Some people I don't know on this call, so I'm interested in learning. Oh, Peggy, go great.
Yep.
Peggy, good to
Awesome.
see you. Glad you're here.
Well, and thank you everyone
Um,
for joining us for this special presentation. If you haven't already, please take a chance in the chat to list your name and your county and/or your role or title. And then we're doing something fun with your favorite grade or subject in school. We want to what brings us together today is the data report and then the Corton Community School evaluation, and we have two great speakers from California Department of Education joining us today, and I will be doing a short introduction with here in a moment. I first want to get to my purpose of today's session. We've called out a couple of things that we want trustees to understand and reflect on. And the slide presentations that you'll see today, is including this one and the speakers, as well as some handout materials. We're going to be making all of this available on our website. And under events, we have past events. We post the recordings and the handouts, and so they're always there for you to revisit at your leisure. And then everyone who registered for this session, whether they attended or not, will get a direct email to them with me once those posts, because it does take a bit for the recording to download and our webmaster to get those posted on the website. So you will get a follow-up when they are posted. So our purposes for today are to help our County Board of Education trustees understand why this data is important, as well as the history and the context behind it, of how this came about. And then part of ACCBE's core pillars is equipping county boards of education trustees to be the best that they can be, to be informed so they can make informed decisions. And all of this is to provide the best service we can to the students which county boards of education serve. And then this is also part of statewide efforts to improve outcomes for at-promise students. So our agenda today, Cindy Kazanis is going to talk about the data and do a review of that, and then Dominic Robinson, if any of you attended our deep dive on court and community schools, Dominic was with us for that first session. He will be speaking this time on the statewide evaluation of court and community schools. And then, very important at the end, we're going to have some reflection and some next steps. And please, for those of you that can hang on, and I will also include this link in the email follow-up when the materials are posted. If you could please take our evaluation. It's short and it's really important for us to help us program seminars like this that are of importance and useful to our County Board of Education trustees. So, by way of refresher, for those of you who may be new to ACCBE, we are up to 41 members. Our newest members are Sierra and Ventura, so we've welcomed them in the last couple of weeks. Our mission is to empower county board members to be the advocates for those students and provide voice for them. And the vision for ACCBE as the leading voice for California County Boards of Education is to improve outcomes not only for the students, but the wider world of their families and communities. So we have four pillars. I won't read these in detail, but the third one of these, engage, elevate, and empower our online education, is specifically to target this pillar, as well as forward looking in that they inform decision making we do for new initiatives that we take on. And just last night, our advocacy committee met, had a very robust discussion. We have a number of county board members participating on that, and they've started drafting what will be ACCBE's advocacy policy platform for 2026. So this is an organization for county board members and driven by county board members. So with that, I am going to turn the floor over to Cindy. Has bio here for Cindy. I will briefly mention that she is the director of the Analysis, Measurement, and Accountability Reporting Division, and she is the breadth of knowledge on data and the data that has been collected, and she's going to be sharing with you today. And so with that, I am going to stop sharing and let Cindy take the floor.
Thank you very much, Deborah. It's really exciting to be here and to share this information with you all in um, your role in these schools and supporting the county offices that run these schools is, I think, really important that you're aware of what's been put out. And so happy to be here to walk through that. So just want to make sure that my screen is showing and you're able to. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Todd. In a former life, Todd and I were served on a committee together and we worked on high-speed network and other projects. And so sometimes it's nice to see a familiar face in the crowd. All right, so we're talking about a data release that came out a couple of months ago, October 1st. And I know Bina and I talked, I think, as early as in late August or even September about bringing this topic to this group and realized that there was a couple other things that were pressing already for you all. And so while it's been out for a bit, I want to make sure that you're aware. Again, you haven't missed anything, but just what is available and why is it here? So the purpose of the presentation is to talk through the information that is now available. I will provide a high-level overview of the statewide data. You will have a copy of this slide deck, as Deborah already mentioned. And then one thing just to consider, when we talk about data, we're always thinking about academic years, and you're going to see why in just a moment. But this is for the 2023 24. A lot of the information is very lagging data, and that's intentional because of how the data is collected. So specifically, there were three components that came into Education Code at the same time, and they were all succession. You can see at the bottom, Education Code section 48, 49, and 50. So they literally were put together at the same time and passed by the legislature over 2 years ago. So specifically, the piece that we're going to talk about today is the first bucket, which is annually report out specific data. I know you're going to hear from Dominic, and so he'll pick up one of the other pieces on the report to the legislature and talk through the work that the department did in that space. We have 4 data sets we're going to talk through, specifically under the Education Code that established this requirement for the department. We were required to look at students who leave a juvenile court or community school and re-enroll in a district or charter school. The second piece was students who leave a juvenile court or community school and did not re-enroll in a district or charter school. The third being the access and completion for these students at a juvenile court or community school to A through G courses, equivalency tests, and accredited college courses. And then finally, doing an aggregation of all of these students and a statewide summary of what we call the California School Dashboard, which is California's accountability system by juvenile court and county community schools. And really, this legislation is grounded in the movement of the state to close the state-run, California Youth Authority and shift some of those responsibilities to the counties. And so, I'm sure others can speak about this more widely, but that is at least how it's been explained to me, as well as how some of these pieces came into play. In terms of the data that are used, these are all data that are submitted to us by local educational agencies. And of course, local educational agencies are your county offices of education, their school districts, their charter schools, and there are a couple of different collections. We're actually getting ready to close a collection tomorrow, which is our what we call our Fall One, which is not a very exciting title, but really what Fall One talks about is our annual enrollment. So how many students were enrolled in California public schools as of the first Wednesday in October? So the first 2 reports that we're going to talk through are based on that information. We also look at our end of year, and why that's important is we can see through end of year the various schools that a student may have enrolled in and exited from, and the reason for that exit. So that's important. And then finally, looking at what we call cohort, which is our graduation rate. How do we look at students, of course, are expected to graduate within 4 years. In California, we also produce what we call a 5-year graduation rate. So that is an annual thing that the department releases, and this year we released that information on November 13th. For reports 3 and 4, we are very dependent on not only the cohort and the completion information. So again, all this information given to us by schools, by school districts, charter schools, and county offices, but we also needed to look at courses, and we picked that up in what we call our Fall 2 collection. And then finally, the final a report actually brings in some assessment data. So we have an assessment contractor in California, which is ETS. We also are grabbing information from the College Board, which is responsible for advanced placement, and International Baccalaureate, which does the IB exam. So the reports are available through downloadable data files. They're in Excel documents. So it is fairly easy to use, and information can be looked at for counties, again, the state level as well as schools. So the first thing we're going to look at is the re-enrollment reports. And just this information gets confusing, so we've highlighted the keywords. So the first piece is we're looking at pupils who left a juvenile court or county community school and who enrolled back in a school district or charter school. That's all it asks for. The second piece of this is those students who left but did not re-enroll back. So we didn't find a subsequent re-enrollment. So there's a little bit of logic. So I hopefully nobody has any PTSD from math or from logic from back in the day. But essentially what we looked at is, first thing was a student expected to show up come September of 2024-2025 school year, the school year we just completed. If they were expected to show up, did they actually re-enroll? Did we see an enrollment in our state level data system? And if they did re-enroll, then we're able to verify whether or not they enrolled in a traditional school, charter school, or if they re-enrolled back potentially in a county community school or the juvenile court school. If we take the logic to the first step being no, they were not expected to re-enroll because, first of all, they graduated with a high school diploma. They may have transferred over state, or they may have had another qualifying factor where we didn't expect to see them in our data set for that fall re-enrollment. So looking at re-enrollment, we look at the calendar, the academic year. And of course, the academic year for many districts now starts August. Some start in July. So the collection opens up in July. So the period we were looking at was July 2023 with a close date of June 30th, 2024. We then look to see, again, that re-enrollment. Did they show up in that October collection that, again, like for this year, closes tomorrow? That is the logic that we're looking at. So that's why we're always going to have lag data with this reporting, because we need to see, again, if a student who was enrolled in the prior academic year actually showed up in the following one. The other piece that we thought was really important to bring in, and this is not part of Ed Code, but really just in terms of talking about these schools and the populations the schools serve, is something called the stability rate. And if you're not familiar with the stability rate, we'll walk through it pretty quickly. We know that from the data set that students who are enrolling in juvenile court schools, especially, and the county community schools have more educational disruptions. They're being moved more frequently. Maybe not at their choosing, it may be the court or some other situation, than students who are enrolled in traditional settings. And because of that temporary nature of the student enrollment, we thought that it would be important to show the stability rate of the student population to understand the context for the school. So I think about a time when I helped a county office that was in the Bay Area, and they were talking about a juvenile court school. And I said, have you ever looked at your stability rate? And they hadn't, and their stability rate was, I think, 6%. So a student had stayed with them for the entire year. And of course, in a juvenile court setting, you hope that that student's not staying with you for the entire year, right? It's almost like reverse psychology when we think about our traditional schools versus these schools where we have different circumstances why the students are there. So truly looking at the percent and the number of students percentage who receive a full year of learning. And what we've determined to be a full year of learning is 245 days that they've continuously been enrolled in the same school. And that's considered to be what we've called stable. So the stability rate also is using a calculation for something called the equity multiplier. But for here, for today, for our purpose, we think it's just important to understand the context of the schools. Excuse me. So overall, for our first two pieces of this report, again, looking at enrollments and re-enrollments and expected to re-enroll, over 77% of the students who were enrolled in a juvenile court or county community school re-enrolled in either a traditional or charter school or another juvenile court or county community school. So the question is, so the students who did not re-enroll, we don't see them show up anywhere in the state of California. Excuse me, I went backwards. This is how it breaks down. So in the denominator, which we were looking at 27,610 students who were expected to re-enroll, we see that 42% of them re-enrolled in a county community or juvenile court school. We see that 34% of them re-enrolled in a school district or charter school, and then that was the percentage we just talked about, which was the 20.8 that did not re-enroll, and that's equivalent to about 6,297 students. Our state stability rate for all alternative schools, so not just limited to juvenile court and county community schools, is 39%. If we were to look at juvenile court schools, I'm sure that number would be much smaller. Shifting over to course enrollment and student outcomes, we again had to, through education code is how this whole thing is dictated again, is look at access to A through G approved courses, high school equivalency tests, accredited college coursework, and the number and percentage of pupils who satisfy A through G course requirements, which of course are used for eligibility for UC and CSU admission. In terms of how we look at course data and how it's collected, we're looking to see if the course was offered as of, again, that first Wednesday in October when we do our annual enrollment. So that's when we get the, that being our marker, districts will report this information and they'll report whether or not the course is certified by the school principal as meeting the course requirements for UC and CSU. So it is something that is well documented at the local level and again is inputted into the student level data system and is certified by that superintendent. In terms of accredited college courses, the terminology is that we're looking for students who've been enrolled in a course and they can receive college credit upon completion, or they're enrolled in both high school and college. They receive both high school and college credit upon completion. So there are some very specialty situations where that can happen. And in terms of what we're looking at for outcome data, our graduation rate is looking at what we call a standard high school diploma, which would be a student who has earned, met the local requirements and has earned a diploma. In terms of met CSU UC, again, we are only looking at graduates. So if a student was able to complete A through G but did not graduate, they would not show up in that metric. We've also been able to, in recent years, I think in the last year or so, start collecting information about graduates who have an exemption from meeting local requirements. And when I think about this group, it definitely is foster students. I think military students have that opportunity, but this local exemption requirement has really allowed some students to get over that finish line because of this provision in education code. Finally, the other piece that we're looking at is students, or rather, students who did not graduate, but they've completed an equivalency exam. So the California Certificate of Proficiency, the Adult Ed high school diploma, a GED, or what we now refer to as the high school equivalency test, HiSET, or a special education certificate of completion. So that's not considered to be a standard high school diploma, but you do get this equivalency certificate, and a lot of employers and others recognize that. So in terms of A through G courses offered, we see statewide that 10,801 were offered. And of those total courses offered, A through G courses is a subset. So less than 20, a little bit less than 20% of those were A through G certified. And of those, we see that there are 50 accredited college courses. In terms of our statewide outcomes, the graduation rate for all of these students within, again, the juvenile court and county community setting is 45.7%. Those that have met UC CSU requirements is just under 6. Those that have utilized local requirements exemption is just over 13%. And then the remaining equivalencies are very minor, or there's no data at all to show up. So again, this information is not only available at the statewide level, at the county level, and at the school level. So finally, just switching over to the dashboard and looking at a statewide summary of those 27,000 students. We had to rerun this information for that new student group and have come up with these statewide determinations. So a statewide look at each of the state indicators for the dashboard. I'm going to start at the bottom because suspension covers all grades. It's our TK through grade 12. And as a state, again, for this population, we are green because we have a low suspension rate for these students. When we look at the academic indicators, which is mathematics, English language arts, and English learner progress, we do see mixed. We see some reds with an orange in English learner progress, and that is only for students who are designated as English learners. In terms of the remaining indicators, those that are specific to high school, which would be our college career indicator at the top and our graduation rate, we do see this group in the red, specifically because for graduation rate, under federal requirements, we need to have at least 68% to get above the red. In terms of chronic absenteeism, we do see the student group in the orange with over 50% of the students chronically absent, which is well above the state average. So just these are some technical considerations for the dashboard. The thing to take away is don't compare this to the actual dashboard because this was a special run just for this group of students. And then in terms of resources, we do have a page that we've put together that I'm going to put in the chat. I just have it ready to go, where you can find information, you can actually access the data, and then it will take you to the data files, which is on a separate page, again, in Excel files. So there's file structures that are put there for those of you that like data or like to dig into things or have somebody that does, they'll be able to understand that. And I think that is the end. So happy to take questions, Deborah, or respond to anything in the chat as needed.
Yeah, we actually have some time between our speakers for questions. So feel free to just come off mute. Want to raise a hand, put it in the chat. Give folks a minute here to gather their thoughts.
Yeah, I also have a colleague, Betty Murda, who's been helping with this rollout. So she'll take the tough questions. No, I'm just kidding. We'll do it together. So thank you, Betty.
Great.
I can start. I've been thinking a lot about this. One is, Cindy, I'm curious, what is the state, is your office, or are there task forces being set up? Like, how is there being follow-up? What's the expectation around? Is CDE doing any follow-up? Do you have an advisory group, or is this your role was just to put out this data and then people do whatever they do?
Yeah, I like the last part. It's just to put out the data. I wouldn't say it's to do whatever they do. We got invited to do this same presentation to the county superintendent. So I know Todd was in attendance and was very gracious about giving us some time. And we've been working closely with a group with the counties that operate these the schools. It is first of all, I would say I come to this with just very humble because I was able to go to one of these schools in the spring just north of us and got to ask some questions of students and just see the setting that they're in and the teachers that are in those positions and the administrators, my goodness, they do a fantastic job. But what we also heard was there are things that you're not going to know about the data. Like the first time a student may show up is in our data set in their entire lives is when they show up in a juvenile court setting. And so I think, Bina, there's so much of still a story to unravel that we've just begun. So my hope is, and there's no charge for me to do anything besides put out the data, is you have two legislative reports that had to be put together. And I'm assuming being in this policy role now for over 2 decades, that the legislature did that intentionally because they first wanted to know what the data said, but they also gave a charge to the department to work through some issues. And I know you're going to hear from Dominic in a bit about that piece. So the legislature has something in mind, and I don't know what it is. I can't read their minds, but we're here to help, and if anything, hopefully start a conversation.
Okay, thank you. And then I have my other question, and then I'm hoping my colleagues here will jump in. And I know we have two superintendents on the call too. So for me personally, the re-enrollment, 22.8% of our kids have disappeared somehow. And I know there's a story behind that, which I think, like for me, I'm really curious to go back and talk to our staff around like the why, like why do they think this is it like this in Sacramento? If it is, like why, like what's the underlying root cause? And as a policymaker, that data point really struck me because I've become very sensitive to the dropout issue in our county. And I am curious how it equates to that dropout issue that we're starting to have a conversation around. And so, I think for me, this data has been useful. Truthfully, in some ways, it's not surprising, unfortunately. Like we see this data when we see our LCAP. But on the other hand, I think it's like I'm hoping our trustees will go back to their boards, kind of look at how their county compares to this data, and then just doing what we're supposed to do, which is ask questions to try to find out the why behind what we're seeing. And then hopefully are there solutions that either we're trying or we're not trying? Yeah. So that was more a comment than a question. So I'm hoping other people have thoughts or questions because I think we still have a few more minutes.
Yeah, if I could comment, Bean, I would just say, Cindy mentioned the committee work at the county superintendent's group. Let me back up and say, first of all, we're so proud of the work that's being done in our alternative education setting, so juvenile court and community schools specifically. But and just a little fun fact, that's where I started. 37 years ago, when I started my education career, that's where I started. And I always told myself, if I ever got unhappy doing what I'm doing in education, I'm going right back to juvenile court and community school because it was so rewarding. But having said that, and we talk about this all the time across the state, every county office operated programs or services are usually unique and tailored to their communities. There are a lot of things in common that are shared across counties. So I guess my advice to all of you would be to really get to know your program, because we have, certainly we have the students that we're obligated to serve or required to serve. But in many counties, such as mine, we also go well beyond that. We serve other students that just for whatever reason aren't fitting into the traditional model. And so, and others don't do that, right? So you really have to understand your program. And I think with any kind of data collection and analysis, what it's meant to do is be a conversation starter. So like Bina was commenting that, that she's going to go back and be able to ask questions and start having conversations. And I think that's important for all of us, right? But it starts with understanding your program and beginning to have those conversations. there's a lot of reasons why the data looks the way that it is here and there, and but I don't want to go into that. I think what's most important is that we recognize we can always do better. We need to understand how we're doing and what we can do to move forward with this really important student population. So.
I was going to add, it's interesting to think about the reentry of students leaving these programs, which is the ultimate goal. In Mendocino County, our incarcerated students come from, I think, besides our own county, I think they come from 3 or 4 other counties that don't operate their own juvenile halls. And while we do quite a bit of follow-up in our own county, I don't think that we're actually doing that same kind of follow-up and check-in with students who are coming from, I mean, it could be 3 or 4 hours away, which is a problem for those students, obviously, because their families aren't able to visit them. It's a problem. But from a data perspective, without thinking about the emotional and socially emotional issues or needs of the students and their families, the follow-up it's not the same when you're dealing with students that are coming from LEAs outside your own county.
Okay, so Cindy, are you able to stay on with us while we have Dominic do his presentation? My thought here was as if folks had other questions, I could put them in the chat, and we'll have a few more minutes at the end after Dominic and his Q&A to loop through. Are you able to stay with us?
Yeah, I think we can stay with you. If anything, I may just turn off my camera and have a bite to eat while Dominic's presenting. So thank you.
No worries. All right, so first I am going to introduce Dominic Robinson. If I have done this right, you should see his bio on the screen. There we go. So, as I had mentioned earlier, Dominic, also with California Department of Education, joined us for our first installment in a 3-part series on a deep dive in court and community schools. Dominic is the director of the whole child division for CDE, and he is now back with us to give an update on the evaluation. So let me move his presentation up here and start the slideshow. All right. And Dominic, the floor is yours.
Good deal. And thank you, Debbie. And thank you so much, Cindy. And good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for just the invitation to be with you today. Of course, I'm Dominic, and I currently also serve as the Senior Policy Director at the California Department of Education. Especially want to just thank Debbie and Bina for their continued partnership and for organizing today's session. Of course, our focus is on Senate Bill 114 and the independent evaluation of our county community schools and juvenile court schools. So I'll do my best to offer a brief high-level overview of how this work came about, what the descriptive scan is telling us, what the state is planning for next steps, and most importantly, how county boards can use this information and what questions you might want to ask some of your county offices of education. The story, I would say, really starts in 2020 with SB 823, which closed the Division of Juvenile Justice and shifted responsibility for serving justice-involved young people up to age 25 back to county-run facilities. County offices of education become responsible for providing educational services for all those youth. That realignment raised important questions for the legislature. Among those questions are we funding county community schools and juvenile court schools adequately? Who's being served and under what conditions? And what do outcomes look like for these young people over time? In response, SB 114, enacted in 2023 and amended by AB 176, requires 2 things: an annual public report and a separate independent scan of county community schools and juvenile court schools. The independent scan, the document we're talking about today, was prepared for CDE by West Ed using publicly available data from 2019 to 20 through 2023 to 24, along with along with some additional re-enrollment data provided by our internal staff. A few things to note that this is a descriptive report. It uses quantitative data to summarize trends in enrollment, demographics, discipline, funding, graduation, GD completion, and school openings and closures. It does not attempt to judge program quality or effectiveness, and it doesn't really draw conclusions about any individual county's program. We in West Ed are very explicit about that because our qualitative work with county offices, youth, families, and community partners is intended to follow this. So that is the backdrop. Our county community schools and juvenile court schools occupy, as you all know, a relatively small footprint in the statewide system, but they serve some of our most vulnerable and most resilient young people. Over the past 5-year period, CCS sites remain fairly stable, declining slightly from 76 to 74, while JCS sites decreased from 56 to 51. The enrollment and demographic data paint a pretty consistent picture. Both school types primarily serve Hispanic, Latino, and African American youth. The student population is majority male, about 62% in CCS and over 80% in JCS. Roughly 1 in 5 students is an English learner, and more than 1 in 5 is a student with disabilities, with even higher rates in juvenile court schools. All JCS schools and about 84% of CCS students are socioeconomically disadvantaged, with higher rates of foster care and homelessness in JCS settings. So when we talk about SB 114, we're really talking about whether we are delivering on our promise of educational equity for justice involved and at-promise youth, and whether the system around them is set up to support successful transitions back to districts, to post-secondary education, or into the workforce. So with that, let me just try to highlight just a few kind of statewide trends that may be useful as you think about our own context. Number one, across the state, the total number of active CCS and JCS sites declined from 132 to 125 between 2019 to 20 and 2023 to 24, with more closures than openings over that period. Enrollment in both systems dropped sharply in 2020 to 21, likely reflecting the pandemic and shifts in placements. And then it rebounded. By 2023 to 24, CCS mean enrollment was about 346 students per site, roughly returning to pre-pandemic levels, while JCS mean enrollment recovered particularly to about 264 students per site. Now, we talk about discipline and exclusions. At the county level, expulsion rates have remained generally low and stable statewide, which is encouraging and broadly aligned with recent changes to the education code that emphasize prevention, due process, and alternatives to expulsion. That said, a handful of counties saw modest increases and others saw small decreases, which suggests to us that there may be opportunities for targeted support and deeper local inquiry about implementation of restorative practices. When we talk about outcomes, graduation, and GED completion, 5-year cohort graduation rates improved in both settings over the 5-year period. For county community schools, mean graduation rates rose from about 51% to just over 60%. For juvenile court schools, they increased from about 44% to more than 53%. GED completion rates remain modest, but are at or above the statewide average, really suggesting that the GED pathways can be an important alternative credential for some students in these settings. Now, the funding, looking just at the expenditures that can be tied directly to CCS and JCS, state and local funds account for the vast majority of the spending, with federal funds representing a smaller but growing share, rising to about 17% of expenditures for CCS and about 21% for JCS by 2023 to 24. Reported expenditures for CCS have grown from roughly 250 million to more than 325 million over the period, while JCS expenditures have held fairly stable at around 120 million. The takeaway is that despite a complex landscape, pandemic disruptions, DJJ realignment, and local program changes, county community schools and juvenile court schools have really maintained or improved by outcomes while serving a population with significant and overlapping needs. So what happens next? SB 114 is not a one-time exercise, which is the good news. The descriptive scan is just really the first step in a longer process of building transparency and using data to drive better outcomes. Looking ahead, there are several, I would say, strands of work CDE is committed to. Number one, moving from description to deeper evaluation. The statute really anticipates further evaluation work, including analysis of cost-sharing arrangements between county offices of education and probation, and more rigorous study of the impacts and policy changes, such as the DJJ closure on youth outcomes. CDE will also be working with county superintendents and an independent evaluator to scope the next phase to ensure that data collection is feasible and really respectful to our local context. Strengthening our data systems and reporting. The report really recommends continued progress toward a more robust longitudinal data system so that we can really securely track students across placements, link funding to outcomes, and better understand re-enrollment, graduation, and post-secondary trajectories. It also calls for more standardized site-level reporting and integration of qualitative and quantitative data input from youth, families, and educators. We're focusing on discipline, transitions, or personalized supports. We'll continue to monitor county-level discipline data, support restorative approaches, and lift up counties that are seeing improvements. The report also highlights the importance of smooth transitions, ensuring partial credits are awarded, records are transferred promptly, and students are supported when they move between JCS and CCS in district schools. Ongoing engagement with our county partners. Of course, CDE is, we're committed to engaging county superintendents, county boards, and other partners, including bodies like yours, as we interpret these findings and design the next phase of work. Really, the statute explicitly anticipates collaboration with county offices to gather this information, which is why we're so happy to be with you today. Now, in terms of formal structures, we really expect to work primarily through existing statewide networks and meetings, and where it makes sense through targeted working conversations or time-limited advisory groups focused on topics like data, youth voice, and policy implementation. We also want to make sure county boards have a seat at the tables, either directly or through this representation. Now, how can county boards use this report? And I want to just shout out again, Debbie, because she was really helpful to really capture it. She said, so you've got this information, now what do you do with it? And from a county board perspective, I can offer a short set of starting questions you might want to take back to your own COE teams. Number one is around access and enrollment. A few questions would be, how have our CCS and JCS enrollment changes, how have they changed since 2019 to 20? And are the particular student groups by race, ethnicity, disability, foster, or homeless status for whom enrollment patterns have shifted in a meaningful way? And do our local enrollment patterns align with what we're seeing in the statewide scan? Or do they look a little bit different, and why? Another is around conditions and discipline. What do our county level expulsion and discipline trends look like over the last 5 years, both at the CCS and JCS in our districts? And how are we implementing the intent of recent discipline code changes around due process, alternatives to expulsion, and restorative practices for youth served in these programs? I would also include resources and alignment. Thinking about how are we aligning the LCFF and other funding streams to these needs identified in the report, particularly around staffing, mental health supports, and transition services. And are we using our data to evaluate whether these investments are improving outcomes for youth we serve? Now, none of these questions are about grading a county program based on a single number. They are about using this descriptive work alongside your local knowledge and community voice to guide continuous improvement and to keep equity for justice involved youth at the center of our governance work. With that, I'll close just by saying, again, thank you for the opportunity to really share this work with you today and for your continued leadership on behalf of students in county, community, and juvenile court schools across California. Also want to just note that unfortunately I won't be able to stay for questions at the end of today's session. Even so, we felt it was important to share this information with you now. And I've asked Debbie and Bina to please pass along any questions that you guys generate so that we can make sure we receive those and then complete any follow-up responses after today's session. We take this really important. We want to continue this partnership because the students in California desperately need it. And with that, thank you again and look forward to continuing our work together.
Great. Thank you so much, Dominic. And then from here, I am going to turn this back over to Bina to lead us in some reflection and next steps. So let me get the slides back up for you, Bina.
And before we do that, are there any questions people have just based on what Dominic shared? I think
Bina, if I could just jump in with a clarification point, I just want to make sure it's clear for all the board members that the county level expulsion data, so under discipline that he's referring to, that is not expulsion from our county operated programs. So those are expulsions from the districts in the county, and those are rolling up to the county level. So I just wanted to be really clear, make sure everybody understands that our programs don't expel students. And only in very rare circumstances are there suspensions.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so we wanted to do a little reflection, a few things as you're thinking about what stood out to you, what questions do these presentations raise for you, and how do you think you'll be able to use this data to improve transparency and outcomes and accountability around court and community schools and the students you serve? And so I'm going to give you a second to think about that and let you know we are also providing a ACCBE created tool for you all to take back and look at that also offers some questions like Dominic did to help you think through kind of maybe the questions you might want to ask back at your county. So what stood out to you either in the chat or just please go off mute. What stood out from you from these two presentations?
Bina, this is Greg Larson from Santa Cruz. I'll jump in if that's okay.
Thank you. Yeah, I love it. Thank you, Greg. Appreciate you.
For the first two questions, or even all three of them, I just need to say I was so impressed with the thoughtful, detailed explanations by the two presenters, as well as the abundance of data that's available that I hadn't accessed previously. So just that stood out for me, just the preparation and attention given to these issues, as well as coordination by ACCBE of, keeping everything in the time frame at the level we needed. I'm a new board member in my first year still, and I still haven't toured our juvenile court programs or court and justice system programs. So it opens the door for me to have more thoughtful discussions with our administrators before and after that, and to just see how statewide and regional data tracks with what we're focusing on. So that's how I'd probably blend questions 2 and 3 together. So thank you.
Thank
to
you.
the presenters and ACCBE.
Thank you, Greg. And I'm glad that you also mentioned your interest in going to see your programs. And I know Todd mentioned that as well. I think it's really important we get out there, we visit our juvenile halls, we talk to the kids in our community schools and see the instruction and just in addition to seeing the data. So thank you.
Yeah.
How about a few other folks? What stood out to you? What questions does this raise? What do you think you'll do? Some next steps, and please fill out our survey as well. But some more reflections here, guys.
I'll just say something. I'm sorry I missed the first presentation. I came in late, but this second one was great because what for me, we hear about our programs, but this was all the numbers statewide, and it just was so refreshing to get that big picture look at it, and it helps you understand your own program better. That's how I feel about seeing the numbers and what was been going on statewide. And I was elected in 2018, and I remember them talking about now there's this big change in the juvenile justice system, which affects our juvenile hall. But I didn't, I was newly elected at the time, so it didn't really sink in. So anyway, this was great, and I assume we could have access to the PowerPoint. So my thought is asking us to be able to show it or something at our board meeting. Uh,
Great.
thought,
Yeah,
okay.
this will be, you'll have the PowerPoints and the recording. Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. How about one or two more people? It could be Chris Williams, if you remember, our former staff person who's like, I was a teacher and I'm fine with silence. I'm going to encourage one more person to give us some feedback. Gina, I know you're there. Beverly.
Okay. You want me to say something?
Yes, sure.
Well, I'm just sort of taking it in and thinking. I know at my county we do a lot talk about where students go when they leave our program, and the goal is to return to district, uh, and if not, the goal therefore is diploma or GED. So we're very focused on that. So it was interesting statewide. Of course, when coming from a medium sort of size county. Whenever I look at any kind of statewide data, I'm always thinking about, well, how is LA County skewing all this for the rest of us? And they've got a lot of attention for having a lot of problems in their juvenile, justice system. So that was on my thoughts as I was looking at this data, and still just thinking about how do I really use this in our own local county.
Okay, great. Thank you. I like the fact that your county board's been focused on transition and return to district, and just like diving into that issue. I think that's an important one. Well, great. Well, save any that I'll be offering. I'd also be glad to offer our two superintendents if they want to have a final reflection, and then we'll do a little close here. No pressure.
Nicole, go ahead.
I don't really have any final reflection other than I really appreciate the work that went into this.
All right. Well,
Yeah,
thank you.
And I would echo that as well. And I think we look forward to working with you all and your colleagues to do the best we can with the students that we serve. It's important work.
Yes, thank you. And that we know everyone is working hard and trying and committed, and that's really inspiring. Before I make a closing comment, I wanted to encourage you guys to go to our survey form, which is in the chat, and it's, I think, a 3-question survey. And as you do that, I just want to make a final comment and then talk about some upcoming events. I just want to say that for ACCBE, this issue of court and community schools is one of our key priorities because we are the school board of record. We, being the county boards of education, are the school board of record for these schools. It's the only students we have any direct say and input over. And we have a responsibility for, their well-being and oversight, and so ACCBE, we did a deep dive, a 3-session series on this court and community schools. Our next step is to develop an advocacy agenda, and we invite all of you to help us figure out what are the advocacy things we want to look at, advocate for around court and community schools to improve outcomes for our kids. We're also going to continue to try to spotlight the good work that is going on in our counties. And if you have something to share from your county that you really want us to spotlight to our trustees, because we want people to build on what's working. So please let us know there. And we hope to continue to help our trustees be involved in this statewide conversation, not just locally, but statewide, around how can we improve outcomes for our at-promise students that we as county boards and county superintendents are responsible for. So with that, we have a few things coming up we're excited about. We're doing, we've started a student board rep networking. So if you have a county office student board rep who sits on your board, we have a whole networking series. We have 2 young people leading this. On December 15th, we're doing a charter schools renewals, approvals, and appeals session. On January 14th, we have Christine Olmsted from CCEE coming to share the learning portrait that is I guess, a tool that the State Board of Education is looking at adopting. And so we'd love for you to come and learn about the learning portrait and give us feedback, because that'll go into the recommendations to the state board. Then we're doing a county board presidents networking and learning session in January, and we're having our annual reflection, our first annual reflection for ACCBE, anniversary celebration and reflection on January 28th, which will be our first full year in operation. So with that, we'll hang out here, but we're finished. And we appreciate you all being here. We appreciate Cindy and Dominic for your work. And we'll see you at the next thing that we're hosting. So thank you all. Have a good holiday, however you celebrate. And we'll see you after the first of the year, unless you're coming to our December 15th event. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Bina. Thanks, Debbie, for organizing this. Bina,